Before you continue listening, take a quiet moment. Place your hand over your heart and breathe in slowly, then breathe out just as gently. Let your mind settle and allow yourself to be fully present. What you are about to hear is not just another collection of sentences. It may become the message your heart has been waiting to hear for a very long time. If these words reached you today, don't brush them aside as a simple coincidence. Sometimes the right message arrives only when we are finally ready to understand it. Have you noticed your emotions becoming stronger lately? Have certain memories appeared without warning, even during ordinary moments? There may be a reason for that. Somewhere, someone has been thinking about you in complete silence. They have carried your name in their heart while never speaking it out loud. And little by little, life seems to be arranging the right moment for your paths to cross again. Someone important is moving closer to a conversation they can no longer avoid. Before you hear the rest, take one more slow breath. This message is meant to feel different. Stay with me because what comes next could change the way you see your own story. If these words found you today, maybe your heart is finally ready to receive something it has been waiting for without even realizing it. Don't skip this next part, because it may explain feelings you have struggled to understand for a long time. There is more to this than meets the eye, and the next few moments may connect pieces that never seemed to fit together before. There is someone, whether they are still present in your life, or someone who quietly became part of your past, who thinks about you much more often than you would ever expect. They may have stayed silent, they may have stepped away. From the outside, it may have looked as though they had accepted the distance and continued with their life without looking back. But appearances do not always reveal what is happening inside a person's heart. Beneath that silence, something has been changing. Day after day, an inner shift has been taking place, growing stronger until it became impossible to ignore. Very soon, this person may find themselves moving toward you. It won't feel like an accident. It won't seem like an ordinary conversation or a casual reunion. They are coming because the emotions they have been carrying have become too heavy to hide any longer. There is something they have wanted to tell you for a long time, but fear, uncertainty, or pride kept those words locked away. Now they feel an increasing need to finally speak the truth. What they choose to share may surprise you in ways you never expected. Stay until the end because one small detail could completely change how you understand this situation. Sometimes the conversations we never expected become the ones that leave the deepest mark on our lives. And when the moment finally arrives, you may realize that every period of silence was quietly leading toward this single meeting. Some connections seem to reach beyond simple logic. Time moves forward. People live separate lives. Distance grows. Silence can last for months or even years. Yet certain emotional bonds seem to remain quietly alive beneath the surface. They do not disappear simply because two people stop talking. They often remain untouched by pride, misunderstanding, fear, or physical separation. Maybe you have noticed unusual moments recently. Thoughts of someone suddenly appeared without any clear reason. You unexpectedly heard their name while talking with someone else. Perhaps they appeared in a dream so vividly that you remembered every detail after waking up. Or maybe a wave of emotion arrived from nowhere, leaving you wondering why your heart suddenly felt so full. Many people quickly call these moments coincidences, and sometimes they certainly can be, but at other times, they feel like gentle reminders that certain emotional connections continue to exist, even after long periods without contact. It can seem as though an invisible thread still joins two lives together, quietly drawing their thoughts toward each other despite the silence between them. Whether you see these experiences as intuition, meaningful timing, or simply the mind returning to an unfinished chapter, they often carry a powerful emotional impact that is difficult to ignore. Keep listening, because the next part may reveal why these moments have been happening more often than you realize, and why they could be preparing you for something you never expected to face. When the same emotions keep returning again and again, they often make us wonder if something important is still unfinished. Long before this person ever thought about reaching out, they tried everything they could to push those feelings away. They filled every empty hour with work, responsibilities, and endless distractions. They told themselves they had already moved on. They repeated the story that the past was over, and life was heading in a different direction. For a while that belief seemed to work, but every time the noise faded, especially during the quiet hours of the night, one thought always came back. It was you. No matter how much they tried to ignore it, your memory continued finding its way into their mind, a familiar laugh, a conversation they couldn't forget, a place that suddenly reminded them of you. Little moments kept reopening feelings they believed were gone forever. Feelings that stay hidden for too long rarely disappear. Instead, they slowly build pressure until they demand to be acknowledged. That is why this moment feels as though it has been quietly forming for much longer than either of you realized. Stay with me, because the next part may explain why this has all been happening now, instead of months or even years ago. Sometimes what looks like perfect timing is actually the result of emotions that have been growing stronger in silence all along. From the outside, this person may seem completely at peace. They may look confident. They may appear successful. They may even smile often enough that nobody suspects what is happening inside. But appearances only tell a small part of the story. Deep within, they have been living with an emotional struggle that almost no one around them could recognize. Again and again, their mind returns to moments the two of you shared. They remember your voice in ordinary conversations. They remember the expressions on your face. They think about simple memories that once seemed unimportant but now carry surprising meaning. Even tiny details they barely noticed before have become impossible to forget. The same questions continue to circle through their thoughts. Why do these feelings still remain after all this time? Why has moving forward been so difficult? Why has no one else made them feel what they once felt with you? Those questions slowly led them toward a truth they never expected to face. The answer has not been easy because it asks them to admit something they avoided for far too long. You mattered much more than they ever allowed themselves to admit. Even harder is accepting that the distance between you was not created by chance alone. They are beginning to understand that many of their own choices helped create the separation, and that realization has become too heavy to ignore. Keep listening, because what they discovered next changed everything they believed about the past. You may naturally ask yourself one question. If these feelings have been so strong, why did they stay silent for so long? The answer is far more complicated than simply not caring. Fear quietly stood between them and the truth. They feared hearing words they were not ready to accept. They feared finding out that your life had completely moved forward without them. They feared your growth, your confidence, and the possibility that you no longer needed them in the way you once did. More than anything, they feared facing the decisions they wished they could take back. Remaining silent felt safer than risking complete honesty. As long as no conversation happened, they could avoid facing the results of their own actions. But silence carries its own weight. Day after day, the truth they refused to speak only became louder inside their heart. What once felt like protection slowly turned into emotional exhaustion. Every passing week made the burden heavier instead of lighter. Eventually they reached a point where avoiding the conversation caused more pain than actually having it. That was the moment they realized silence could never bring the peace they had been searching for. Don't leave now, because the next part reveals the turning point that finally pushed them toward action. Not long ago, something unexpected changed the direction of their thoughts. It may have looked like an ordinary moment to anyone else. Maybe they saw a recent picture of you. Maybe someone casually mentioned your name. Perhaps they walked past a familiar place, heard a song connected to an old memory, or found themselves surrounded by people while still feeling completely alone. Whatever happened, it touched something deep inside that they could no longer ignore. In that single moment, one truth became impossible to escape. If they never speak honestly, they may carry this regret for the rest of their life. This was not a sudden emotional reaction, or a passing feeling that would disappear after a few days. It came from a much quieter and deeper place. A calm certainty that hiding their emotions was no longer possible. That is why the conversation ahead is different from anything you may have imagined. They are not simply reaching out to exchange polite words or ask how life has been. They are preparing to share everything they kept locked away for far too long. The emotions hidden behind pride, the regrets carried through countless silent nights, the truth they hoped would fade but never did. For a long time you may have believed they had become emotionally distant, but what you are about to hear may completely change the way you understand everything that happened between you. Stay until the very end, because the next part could reveal the one thing they have been afraid to say all along. For a long time it may have looked as if they were completely unaffected by everything that happened between the two of you. Maybe they appeared distant, maybe they seemed emotionally closed off, as though the past no longer mattered. But what you saw on the surface may not have reflected what was happening inside. The truth could be very different. Their feelings reached much deeper than they ever allowed themselves to show. Their actions never fully matched what was in their heart. So much remained hidden behind fear, uncertainty, hesitation, and the struggle to open up emotionally. They convinced themselves that keeping everything inside was the safest choice, yet every feeling they buried quietly stayed with them. Over time, that silence became heavier than they expected. Understanding this may completely change the way you look at everything that happened between you. The distance may not have been caused by a lack of care. Instead, it may have been created by emotions they simply didn't know how to express. Stay with me, because what comes next may reveal the one truth they have been carrying longer than anyone realizes. Sometimes the biggest emotions are hidden behind the quietest silence, and the next few moments may help you see that silence from an entirely different perspective. They have imagined this conversation more times than they could ever count. In quiet moments, they replayed every possible version in their mind. They pictured your face, they imagined your questions, they wondered if you would stay silent, smile, or quietly walk away. Every possibility crossed their thoughts, yet no amount of preparation ever removed the fear. Even now they still don't know how the real moment will unfold. But one thing has become impossible to ignore. They can no longer keep pretending that nothing happened. They know they must finally speak honestly, whatever the result may be, even if telling the truth means risking everything they still hope for. They have reached the point where honesty feels lighter than silence. The words waiting inside them are simple, yet they carry enormous weight. They want to admit they were wrong. They want to acknowledge that they didn't protect what the two of you shared the way they should have. They want to confess that they didn't truly understand how to love with the patience, openness, and care you deserved. For someone who has spent so long protecting their pride, saying those words feels incredibly difficult. Lowering those emotional walls asks for a kind of courage they avoided for years. Don't skip the next part, because this realization changed the way they see both you and themselves forever. As time passed, something unexpected happened. Distance began teaching lessons that closeness never could. When someone is always there, it's surprisingly easy to overlook the quiet value they bring into everyday life. Only after that person is gone, does their absence become impossible to ignore. That is exactly what has been happening inside them. Time has given them a new perspective they never expected to gain. They now recognize qualities in you that once seemed ordinary, but now feel incredibly rare. Your calm presence brought peace into moments they barely noticed before. Your loyalty was never temporary. It came from a sincere place. Your kindness wasn't an act or a performance. It was simply who you were. As they continued meeting new people and experiencing different situations, they quietly found themselves making comparisons without even meaning to. Again and again, something felt incomplete. Not because other people lacked value, but because the connection you shared carried a depth they failed to recognize while they still had it. Now they understand that what existed between you was never just another relationship or another passing chapter. It was a rare connection that many people spend their entire lives hoping to experience. Keep listening, because the next realization became the hardest one of all. Now they stand at a place that feels both hopeful and frightening. As much as they want to see you again, they are equally afraid of what happens after the truth is finally spoken. Once honesty enters the conversation, There is no returning to the safety of silence. Everything changes. They know they may face disappointment. They understand that you may have completely moved forward. They know they cannot control your response. And they may receive the closure they secretly feared all along. Yet they have realized something even more difficult. Carrying unanswered questions for the rest of their life feels heavier than facing whatever answer you choose to give. That is why they are slowly choosing courage over comfort, even though courage comes with no promises. Before that meeting ever happens, there is one important thing for you to remember. This story is not only about what they have been feeling. It is also about your own peace, your own growth, and the person you have become through every moment of waiting. Whatever happens next, never forget that your value has never depended on someone else's timing or ability to express their emotions. Stay until the end, because the final part may help you see this entire journey from a completely new point of view, and it may leave you with a sense of clarity you didn't expect. This story is not only about what they have been going through, it is also about the person you have become. You are not the same individual you were before. Life has shaped you through experiences that once felt impossible to carry. You faced difficult moments, learned lessons you never expected, and slowly became stronger, wiser, and more emotionally balanced. Because of that growth, if this meeting happens, don't enter it with expectations or emotional dependence. Walk into it with a clear mind and an open heart. Listen carefully to everything they choose to say, but don't let beautiful words alone decide what you believe. Watch for consistency. Notice the small actions that follow the conversation. Pay attention to whether their choices match the promises they make. Words can inspire hope in a single moment, but real change reveals itself through repeated actions over time. Honest apologies have little meaning without responsibility. Lasting transformation is something you can recognize through behavior, not only through conversation. Trust what your eyes observe just as much as what your ears hear. Stay with me, because the next few moments may completely change the way you think about this meeting. Sometimes the most important answers are not spoken directly. They quietly appear through the choices people make when nobody is watching. When this encounter finally takes place, something may immediately feel different. Before either of you says a single word, you may notice a quiet shift in the atmosphere. Time may seem to slow down. Everyday sounds may fade into the background. For a brief moment, it could feel as though everything around you becomes less important than the person standing in front of you. There may be an unusual sense of familiarity that is difficult to explain, almost as if your heart understands something before your mind can find the words. Whether you see that feeling as intuition, emotional memory, meaningful timing, or simply the experience of reconnecting with someone who once mattered deeply, it often carries a unique emotional weight. You may notice long pauses, lingering eye contact, silence that somehow speaks louder than conversation itself. This won't feel like an ordinary exchange. It may feel like the closing of one chapter while another quietly begins. Hidden truths finally have room to be spoken. What happens after that moment will depend not only on what is said, but on the decisions both of you make once the silence has finally ended. Don't leave yet, because the next truth may be the one they have struggled to admit more than anything else. For all this time there has been one truth they kept trying to escape. Deep inside, they never completely stopped loving you. They tried to convince themselves those feelings would disappear if they stayed busy enough. They focused on work, new routines, endless distractions, and perhaps even other relationships, hoping that time alone would erase what remained inside their heart. But genuine emotions rarely vanish simply because we ask them to. They often wait quietly beneath the surface, returning during peaceful moments when the mind finally becomes still. Over time, pretending required more energy than simply accepting the truth. Eventually they reached a point where denying their feelings became more exhausting than admitting them. That is why they are finally ready to face what they avoided for so long. Not because they know how you will respond. Not because they expect everything to return to the way it once was, but because they can no longer live as though those feelings never existed. Whatever happens after this conversation, life will not remain exactly the same. Perhaps this becomes the beginning of a completely new chapter built on honesty and greater understanding. Or perhaps it becomes the conversation that finally allows both of you to move forward without carrying unanswered questions. Either outcome holds value. When truth is finally spoken, uncertainty slowly gives way to peace. Sometimes healing grows through reunion. Other times it arrives through acceptance. Both paths can lead to something meaningful. Keep listening, because there is one final lesson that matters more than everything else. If this conversation unfolds, allow them the space to say everything they have carried for so long. Resist the urge to interrupt or reach quick conclusions before hearing the full story. Let the truth unfold naturally. Listen not only to the words they speak, but also to the sincerity behind them. Then, when it is your turn, answer from a place of calm instead of reacting in the heat of emotion. A peaceful mind often sees what strong emotions cannot. Give yourself permission to take the time you need before making any decision. Choose what protects your peace, honors your boundaries, and reflects the person you have become. Above everything else, remember this one truth. You are not standing in this moment because life is testing you. You are here because you have been given something many people spend years searching for: clarity. Whether that clarity leads to a fresh beginning, a deeper understanding, peaceful closure, or a completely different direction, it is still a gift. You survived the silence that once filled your mind with questions. You carried yourself through disappointment. You grew stronger through experiences that once seemed impossible to overcome. Never forget how far you have already come. Before this message comes to an end, pause for one quiet moment and ask yourself a simple question. What awakened inside your heart while listening today? Did you feel hope, peace, reflection, or perhaps a sense of understanding that had been missing for a long time? Sometimes the answers we receive are not meant to bring another person back into our lives. Sometimes they arrive to help us rediscover the strongest version of ourselves that had quietly disappeared beneath pain, uncertainty, and disappointment. And perhaps that is the greatest gift this journey was always meant to give you. If this message spoke to your heart, stay until the next video, because what you discover there may help you understand your journey even more deeply.